Hi, in this half-hour demo I'm going to show you how you can use Microsoft's Power BI to analyse the results from a staff questionnaire. Here we've got our questionnaire and its results in the form of a simple Excel spreadsheet. So you can see we've captured the full name, the department, the role, the gender of the members of staff, and we've also captured what responses they made to various different questions. So for example, we've got a question here, I'm proud to be a member of staff at the school, and they've been invited to say whether they strongly disagree or strongly agree or anything in a range in between those two possibilities. And you can see there that we've got about 37 replies to this questionnaire. So what we're going to do is we're going to import this questionnaire into Microsoft Power BI and create some analysis of the data that it contains. Now here is Microsoft Power BI. You can install it on your machine in a couple of different ways. You can either Google download Microsoft Power BI, and that will take you to a Microsoft site where you can download an executable file and install it. Or you can go to the Microsoft Marketplace and install it from there. There are some advantages to installing it from the Microsoft Marketplace because Power BI receives updates on a monthly basis, and if you install it via the Marketplace, those monthly updates are applied automatically. If you can't access Microsoft Power BI, have a word with your IT support people and they can help you. Here's the Microsoft Power BI homepage, and you can see that it's giving you various different options, and the option that leaps out at us here is import data from Excel. There's also an option up here to do the same thing, and you can also go to get data. Basically, you'll get various different options to pull data from Excel. It's worthwhile pointing out at this point that Microsoft Power BI can pull data from a lot of different sources as well. It's not just limited to Excel files, and that's part of what makes Power BI such a powerful product. But for now, let's go to import data from Excel. And we can navigate to the location where I stored that questionnaire data. If you don't have access to any data that you can use for this demonstration, I will put a copy of this data. Have a look below the video for a link to the file. So I'm going to choose my staff questionnaire 2021 here and double click on it to load it up. And Microsoft Power BI will now go to that file and it will read the contents of that file. And here it comes after a short pause. Once it's identified what's in that file, it's given me two options. Now, because that's an Excel spreadsheet, it's spotted that there is a tab there that I called responses. So that's the name of a tab at the bottom of that spreadsheet that I showed you a few minutes ago, and it was called responses. If I put a tick there, it should spot all the columns that are in that table. And there we go, it's interpreting what it finds in that Excel spreadsheet, and it's just presenting me with this list, so I can just double check that it's spotted all the column headings in there and so on, and everything looks okay. If I'm happy with that, then 99 times out of 100 it'll be fine. Just click the load button here. So it goes to that file, and now it loads what it finds in that file. And it's important to bear in mind that what it's doing there is connecting to that file for the first time. And it expects you to change that file and to update that file. So it's created a connection at this stage, and that connection can be refreshed so that as you enter more responses to that questionnaire, all the visualizations that we create in Power BI can also be refreshed really easily. We'll just need to press the refresh button, which is up here. I'll come to that later. But for now, what you should notice is we have in this Fields tab right at the far side of the page here, we have got a new table where we had nothing before. We now have a table called Responses. It's picked up the name of the tab from Excel there. And if you expand it, what you should find then is we've got all the column headings from our original Excel spreadsheet. At the moment, we're in the visualization view, which you can see is selected over this side of the screen, where we've got the little symbol there, the little icon there. This is where the visualizations will be put, the graphs in other words. But notice there's also another view underneath there that allows us to have a look at the data as it looks in the spreadsheet. So there's another way of just checking what data, the raw data if you like, that's come from that spreadsheet just down there. I'm going to flick back up to this view here which is the important one, the report view, because this is where I want to create our first visualization. And I want our first visualization to just be a simple count of how many responses that we've received. So I'm going to do that by generating what's called a measure. And a measure is Power BI's equivalent of calculations in Excel. So just bear with me for 1 minute while I show you how to create your very first measure. To create a new measure, what we do is we go up to this button here that says New Measure and we click on it. After a pause, it opens up a formula bar. And the format of a measure is we give it a name and then put an equal sign and then we put the formula after it. Now the formula I'm going to use here is a formula that will count up the number of rows in our responses table. Remember, our responses table looks like this. And this table has a certain number of rows. The number of rows in this table is basically equal to the number of responses that we've received. So my formula, if I just go back into this view, I'll just need to click on new measure again. So the formula I'm going to put in here is count the number of rows in our responses table, and that will be equal to the number of responses we've received. So we're going to give it a name first. So I'm going to call this count responses. And then we put a space and an equal sign. And then comes the formula part of our measure. And the formula is called count rows. And as you start typing count rows into the bar there, you'll see it allows you to auto-complete the full name of the formula. So you can, if you're happy with that name of the formula, you can just press the tab button and that accepts count rows, starts a bracket, and we can type next what we want to count the rows of. Well, we want to count the rows of the responses table. So start typing responses. Obviously, if your table's called something different, type the name of whatever you've called it. And you can see again here that it's guessed that I want to type the word responses because it knows that's the table there. So if I'm happy with that, I can press tab again and just finish off the formula with a closing round bracket there. And that's it. That's the most complicated formula that we're going to use. If you're happy with the formula, click on that tick next to it there. When you click on the tick, it just checks through the formula to make sure it's okay. And once it's happy, there it is. You can see there's our new measure just at the side there, count responses in the fields pane on the right hand side. So let's use it. I said what we wanted to do was just have a box on the screen that says the number of responses that we've received for our questionnaire. In the visualizations pane that you can see here, what we've got are all the visualizations that we can put onto this page. Here's our page here. And you'll see there's lots of bar charts on here. There are pie charts, donut charts, gauges, maps, loads and loads of different visualizations for you to choose. We're just going to stick to some simple ones for this next half hour. But the one I want us to use is this one here. It's a card visualization. So you can hover the mouse over the visualizations if you're not quite sure, and it tells you what the visualization's name is. I'm hovering mine over that one. That's the card visualization. And that's the one that we're going to add. So I'll click on the card visualization. And that was a single click, and what it's done is it's put a blank card on the screen. There it is. You can see it's blank. This is just a placeholder. There's no actual data in here at all. But we can change the size and change the position of that visualization to wherever we want it to be. I'm just going to put mine down here at the bottom. I'm going to make it slightly smaller and put it down towards the bottom of the screen there. It's blank at the moment. There's nothing in it. So we need to fill it with something. How do we do that? Well, there's the measure we created a few minutes ago, count responses. Once we chose the card visualization, this pane opened up underneath here with fields highlighted there. And it's blank. And it says add data fields here. So that's the clue. All we need to do is drag our count responses measure and drop it onto fields. And you can see what happened there. As soon as we put count responses onto there, it did what it says on the tin. It counted how many responses are in that table by counting the number of rows in the table and put 37 on there. And there are 37 responses in that Excel spreadsheet. So there we go. That's our very first visualization added. And you can resize it slightly, reposition it if you want to. I'm just going to put mine down there for now. Okay, let's put our next visualization on this page. Our next visualization, I think, should be the answers to one of the questions that we've got. Let's just remind ourselves what we have in terms of answers. Well, in this file, as well as full name and department and so on, the first question on the list is this one. I'm proud to be a member of staff at this school, and we've got agree, strongly agree, disagree, and so on down the side there. So I'm going to click back on the reports view here, and we're going to add a bar chart that basically graphs that information. So in the visualizations pane here, you see there are lots of different options for bar charts. Most of them will be perfectly fine to add if you want, but I'm going to go for this second one on the list, a stacked column chart. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that nothing is selected on this page. If I left, for example, this one selected and clicked on bar chart, it would try and change this visualization into a bar chart, and I don't want that to happen. I'm quite happy with that card visualization, so I'm just going to click there into some white space, and now I can click on the stacked column chart visualization, which again puts a little empty placeholder on the screen. So let's make it quite big. We'll resize it later, but for now, so we can see what's going on, let's make that quite big, and you can see it's empty. Now, to populate this visualization with some data, the key box is this one. See, in the visualizations pane here, before we only had one box, if you remember, with the card visualization. Here, because this is a bar chart, we've got quite a few options to choose from. But always, when you're creating a new visualization, the key one is usually the one that says values on it. The values are what we want to count up and put on the graph. So what do we want to count up on this graph? We want to analyze a question. We want to count up the responses to that question. So again, our measure is going to come in very useful, and I'm going to click on or drag count responses and drag that to values. Release it over values. And what happens? Well, we get a really boring bar chart at this stage. It's a bar chart with one bar on. What's in that bar? Well, hover the mouse over the bar and it will tell you what the numbers are behind it. And this is saying count responses, and in my case it's got 37. So it's basically just telling us what we've already put into this card visualization underneath. So far, so uninteresting, really. So what we need to do to make this a much more informative graph is we want to know the individual questions. How many staff agreed or disagreed with that particular question? So let's choose our question. So if you remember, the question was, I'm proud to be a member of staff at this school. I'm just hovering the mouse over there. You can't see the whole text there, but if you hover the mouse there, it does give you the whole text as a tool tip. If you want to, you can make that a bit bigger so you can see the questions in a bit more detail. Or do what I'm doing, just hover the mouse over it. So I'm going to take that question and I'm going to drop it on the axis. The axis there is the x-axis along the bottom. So what you'll see will happen if I drag I'm proud to be a member of staff and drop it on the axis for this graph. The graph redisplays, and we can see now a count of the number of members of staff who agree, 19, disagree, 13, who are neutral, 2, strongly agree, 2, and who didn't fill out a response, blank, and that's one member of staff. So there you go. There's our very first graph. And while we're on a roll, let's just resize that slightly. I'll put it up there, resize it, and let's put another graph on here straight away. So remember what I said, if you want to put a new graph on here, click into some white space first, or you'll end up reformatting the graph that was currently selected. So I clicked onto some white space, so no visualization is selected there. Again, I'm going to go for a stacked column chart, second one on the list there. Click on it, and there we go. There's the blank placeholder. You can resize it now or resize it later. I just get it roughly the right size at this point. And again, what do we want on this graph? Well, again, go back to your data. You can click on the data tab here, which tells us where all the questions are. Second one on the list here is pupils are safe at this school. So let's use that one. So like we did before, you remember we clicked on count responses and dragged it down to values. And then there's our question here, pupils are safe at this school. We can drag that onto the axis, and now we've got our responses to that one as well. Okay, bar charts are all very well, but they're not the only charts that we have. We also have the option of putting, say, a pie chart on here, or a donut chart, whatever chart you feel is probably best for the data. So let's put a pie chart on here now. So again, clicking into some white space. Whoops, click too often then. If you put the wrong box in there, if you do what I did, and that's click once too often, it's tried to put another box in there, you can always click on the 3 dots up there and remove it, and that just takes the visualization out. So there's a pie chart there on the list. Click on the pie chart, move it roughly into position. And again, have a think about what you actually want to graph. What numbers are you trying to count up here? And actually in this example, in almost every case, we want to count up how many responses we've received. So that's why our measure is so important. And again, this is a pie chart, but it still has a values option here. And that's the key one here. We need to drag count responses onto values there. Now there's no axis on this particular type of graph. There's not always an axis. There was an axis on this graph here, the bar chart, as you'd expect. But on a pie chart, the equivalent is the legend. So let's take our question and let's pick a question here. Let's pick I'm proud to be a member of staff. Oh no, we've got that one already. Let's go, our school did a good job implementing remote education. Let's take that question there and put this onto the pie chart. So I'll drag that and I'll put that onto the legend. And now we've got the same kind of approach here, but this is in the form of a pie chart. Make it a bit bigger if we want to. We've got the legend at the side now. The pale blue segment here indicates all the pupils or all the staff who disagreed with that statement. You can still hover over it and hover over all the other segments as well and get a tooltip that tells you how many members of staff that refers to. One of the nice things about pie charts is they also give you the count of responses as a percentage as well on the tooltip. And there you go. So that's our second one. Now it's at this stage that I really recommend that you think about the visual appearance of your page here. It really doesn't make any sense just to put lots and lots of visualizations in here, throw them all on. It's very easy at this point to go a bit mad and make a bit of a mess of the page. So a couple of tips here before we go any further. First tip is it's much easier to make sure all these visualizations are placed in the right place, evenly apart from each other, if you have a little bit of color on the background of the page. So I'm just going to click on the background, the white space behind these visualizations. And when I do that, I can go to this formatting pane here. And if I click on the formatting pane, it gives me an option for the page background. And the page background I can change. So I can pick a colour for the page background. And I recommend you choose a pale grey colour because we want the page background to fade into the background. So I've picked that little grey colour there, very pale grey. And I'm just going to put a little bit of transparency on there. So it's about 50% transparent. But you can see what happens now. That background allows me to see straight away that I've not lined these graphs up particularly well. So it gives me a little bit of an opportunity to line up the visualizations and also to make sure they're roughly the same size as well. And that makes your visualizations look a lot better, a lot neater and a lot tidier. The other thing I'm going to do at this point is put a title on here to tell the end users exactly what we're looking at. So I want to put a title in this top area up here. So I'm going to click on the text box, which is another type of visualization, but it's a very simple visualization. It just allows us to put some text in. I'm moving this one around by clicking on the 3 dots up at the top here, because sometimes I have problems moving it around if I don't use those 3 dots. Put it roughly into position here, and I'll click the cursor. You can see the cursor's a bit small there, but it's in the top corner. I need some bigger text here, so I'm just going to change the font to a bold font, and I'm also going to change it to a larger size. And now I should be able to type in staff questionnaire. Put the date on there. There it is. And I can make it a bit wider, so it takes up the full width of the page there, maybe a bit smaller there. And I've got now some indication for the end users of exactly what they're looking at in terms of data. Another thing I'm going to add here is I'm going to add some drop downs to this list that allow you to select by the type of member of staff. Remember, in our original data, we've got the full name of each member of staff, we've got the department, the role, the gender. Well, it would be nice if we could allow our users to choose a particular department, or choose a particular role of staff, or just choose the male staff, or just choose the female staff. And we can do that by using what's called one of these here, which is a slicer. So we're going to put some slicers on to allow our end users to choose by one of those categories of members of staff. So I'm going to click into some grey space again, and I'm going to go over to the slicer visualization and click on it, and it pops a little empty box up there. I'm just going to resize it slightly and line it up with the other boxes. And this visualization, this slicer visualization, works in exactly the same way as these other visualizations, in as much as we have a box here that says field. And I can choose one of these fields down the side here to put into that slicer. I'm going to put the department column into that slicer, just drag it across, drop it over field. And now you can see it's picked up the 3 different departments who completed my questionnaire, and basically we have a tick box here. So we can put a tick against the English box, and now what happens here is that all these visualizations update, and we now have just the responses given by our members of the English department. If I click on maths, again, all the boxes update, all the visualizations update, and now I've just got maths department, or click on science for science department. If I want to take off those filters, there's a little eraser icon there, which means I can click on that, and that clears off all the selections, and I go back again to my list of all the responses. Notice that the count of responses goes back to 37. So that's our first slicer. Slicers are really useful and give the end users some really interesting ways of looking at the data in different ways. Okay, let's do the same thing but for staff role. So again, I'll click into some grey space. Again, click on the slicer. It pops the slicer in there. It's actually done a good job of putting it in the right place. So all I need to do is find role from the list of fields on this side of the screen, drag it and drop it into field there. So now you can see that we've got the 3 roles as well that our staff have completed. And again, if I just want to see responses from just teaching staff, there's all the responses from teaching staff, classroom assistants, and so on. And you can combine those with the values in the other slicer. So if I want to just look at the English department, and I've got classroom assistant highlighted there, those are the responses from the English classroom assistants, and I can click on teaching staff, and these are the responses from the English teaching staff. So you can build in these slices, like I say, to give different ways of analysing your data. And again, a few other things I'd like to change about this page of visualizations at the moment. First thing I want to change is the title on some of these graphs. It's a bit wordy, count responses by I'm proud to be a member of staff at this school. I think we can make it a bit shorter and snappier and a bit easier to understand. And we can change the title of any of these graphs by going to the visualizations pane over here and specifically looking at this formatting pane, the one that looks like a paint roller. So I've highlighted this graph here, and if I click on the paint roller now, I should find that down towards the bottom here, we've got an option that says title. There it is. It's currently on. But if I use the little downward pointing arrow to expand the box there, you can see where the title text has been set. Now that's just default text. So I can change that to whatever I want it to be. Now I just want to get rid of where it says count responses by. I'm actually just going to make this a little bit wider, this pane here, because it's a little bit tricky to read the whole thing. So I just want it to say, I'm proud to be a member of staff at this school. And I'd be quite happy with that. So you can see now, hopefully you can see, if I get rid of that, that it's changed the text there. Now, while I'm here, I'm also going to go down and highlight the title of the next graph, because you'll see this stayed open and I can change the title of the next graph here and do the same thing there and do the same thing to this one. So that looks a bit better. The other thing I'd like to change here is, for example, here we've got a scale down at the side that tells us how many responses we've received, but I just like the number. I just like the count of how many responses they've got and agreed on the actual column itself. So again, highlighting this first graph here, there's an option here again under this formatting pane that says data labels. The default is off. I'm going to turn it to on. And that puts the number down the side there. So that looks better. And while I'm here, I can go onto this one here and I can do the same thing for here, turn the data labels to on. There we go. The other thing I might think about on this graph here is I don't really need the y-axis down the side. If I've got the numbers on there, I don't need a y-axis as well. It just clutters up the screen. So I can get rid of the y-axis. Again, highlighting the graph there, there's an option that says y-axis. And we can turn the y-axis off just by clicking on that slider. That takes the y-axis off, and we've just saved a little bit of space on the screen. Also on the x-axis, it's repeating the question underneath. We don't need it to repeat the question underneath. So on the x-axis there, I can scroll down, and then under the x-axis category, there's an option that says title. I'm going to turn that to off. So now I've got this graph looking exactly how I want it to look. And that's great. I could do the same thing for the next graph and repeat it. But here's a quicker way of doing it. I can highlight the first graph, and a little bit like we have in other Microsoft products, we've got a format painter. So if I take the format painter and I click that, we've now got two graphs that look exactly the same. So we're nearly up in terms of time. I've nearly done the half hour now. So I just want to finish off with a few little extras just to bring this to a conclusion. Okay, so I'm just going to take off these filters. If you remember, I put some filters on here that mean I'm not seeing the full 37 responses. I'm only seeing a few of them. So I'll take those filters off by clicking the little clear selections options there and there. So we're back to our 37. What I'd like to do is put another pie chart underneath this one. So what I could do, I could click into some grey space and I could click on the pie chart option again and set it up like we did before. But sometimes a quicker way of doing it is just to highlight it, copying that into the clipboard by clicking the copy button up there and clicking paste, which creates an exact copy of that particular pie chart. It's exactly the same size and formatted in exactly the same way, so it fits quite nicely there underneath. What I can do is I can highlight it and just pick a different question. Replace "our school did a good job implementing remote education." I can take that out by pressing the cross there. And I can pick one of the other options here, which says "our pupils' behaviour is at least good at this school." I've not used that one before. No, that's okay. And I can take that one, drag that, and pop that on the legend. And now pupils' behaviour is at least good. Notice that the title has stayed the same. So what I probably need to do there is just change the title. So I go to Format, go to Title, and put pupils' behaviour is at least good. There we go. So that's our fourth and for now final visualization on here. I'm just going to finish this off by putting 2 or 3 card visualizations that tell me how many responses have been received from the English department, the Maths department, and the Science department. And that's really easy to do. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to take our existing card visualization and I'm going to copy it again. So there's the copy button, copy. I'll create a paste the copy onto our visualization and pop that in. Now I'm going to move it to the side here, and I want this one to have the number of responses received by the English department in here. How can I do that? Well, we have here a filter pane, and the filter pane allows us to put filters onto either individual visualizations or this whole page, or if we do have a multi-page report, the whole report and all of its pages. We've only got one page here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a filter to this one visualization such that the department equals English. So if I look for department here and look for the filter pane here, you'll see on the filter pane here, there's 3 sections: filters on this visual, filters on this page, filters on all pages. Well, if I take department and put it on filters on this visual, and there's a box there that says add data fields here. So this is filters on this visual, this one visual. I can now choose to just put English results onto that visualization. And now that says 14, and it says count responses underneath there. What I would like that to say is English responses. And I can change the text under there by going to where it says fields here. And if I double click on that, I can change the actual text that's displayed. And I can put English department underneath there. So I've just typed English department there. And I think if I press enter now, we should find that the title underneath those 14 responses also changes. Let's change count responses there. So it says total responses. And there we go. And very quickly now, because I'm running out of time, I'm just going to repeat the same thing and do the same for a copy of that English department one. There's the filter. Here's my copy. There's the filter saying department is English. If I drop down that menu, click on maths, this now tells me how many responses from the maths department. So I just need to change that to maths. And finally, just to round this off, let's Control V again. Control Copy and Control V does the same thing as going up here. Control C and Control V. And I will just change it from the maths department, finally, to science. And there we go. If I had more time, we could even that out a little bit, make it a little bit neater. But that's more or less the half hour up. One final thing, if you want to share this report with your colleagues, you can, of course, get them to put Power BI on their machine as well and install Power BI and show them where to find your Power BI file, because you can do a file save as you normally would. But the best way is to use the publish option here. When you use the publish option, it will in the first instance prompt you to save your local file. So I'm going to call this questionnaire, and this creates a PBIX file on your local drive. Save it somewhere secure, of course. But once it's done that, it invites you to upload this to the internet. And I'm going to choose my workspace. And if you choose, you'll have the option to choose your workspace. But this allows you to upload a copy of this to the internet, and it allows other people to be able to access this questionnaire through the internet. So they don't need a copy of Power BI themselves. All your colleagues would need to access this report is access to the internet and a valid login ID and password for your network. And this is a copy of our report. I've just published it now. Here's what it looks like on the internet. See, I'm in a web browser here, and I've gone to this website, app.powerbi.com. This is the very best way to save your reports. If you possibly can, choose this way, then all your colleagues will get an exactly perfectly functional copy of this report. They can do lots of other things, integrates brilliantly with Teams. You can export it to PowerPoints and PDFs, and you can cut and paste copies of these graphs and paste it into Word. So many things you can do with it, but that's only if you upload it to app.powerbi.com. So thank you. I hope you found that useful.